is it that drew you to attend this convening?
I'm very interested in understanding how what we're doing in Canada, on the West Coast, in British Columbia, resonates around the world. I'm very interested in understanding whether the ideas that we're generating and the work that we're doing and the energy that it's creating has some resonance in other places, because I think the only way we're going to succeed is if we can grow it bigger than the west coast of Vancouver Island. Confirmation of work that's going on in different regions. And you know, a lot of people, I think including myself, come to these things not knowing if we know what the heck we're talking about or what the heck we're doing, you know? But I just came from a trip into the Kitlope with 2 new friends from Australia. And, you know, just the work that they're doing is absolutely the same as what we're attempting to do with our community.
I'd never heard of anything like this before, the different format and the challenge of looking at a new paradigm and being engaged in possibly some interesting discussions about a new vision.
We in Nepal are also facing with similar challenges and also thinking in the same line how to deal with those challenges. So I thought it'll be very interesting to come over here and learn from many of the other thinkers who are much more qualified than myself, and I really look forward to meeting them and learning from them.
I mean, there's an amazing group of people here, so I will learn a lot.
I think the thing that attracted me and made it quite exciting to come all the way from Cameroon.
The ambition of the event to suggest creating some momentum and a true network around sort of resilient regions was pretty compelling.
We also like the idea, that we could work with people who have got the length of experience that the people here at Ecotrust have, in implementing business models that are not necessarily mainstream, that are innovative, that introduce new thinking, about how we could do things.
There is interest about bringing people from different regions about the concept of, around the concept of resilience, but really about how do we deal with it in a way that is more collective.
And then simply getting to meet and learn from a variety of practitioners and policymakers and political leaders who are doing place-based work all over the world. So it's a pretty easy decision to walk the mile from my office down to the Ecotrust building.
So I accepted on those bases that I was going to be in the company of people who grapple with similar issues that I grapple with, but also be in a company of people who have implemented a business model in which I believe in.
So I say, okay, this is the place I want to be, and that's it. Yeah, that's what brought me here.
When you ask what brings me here, we've now got a situation on the north coast of British Columbia where we have a major proposal to bring up oil pipeline from the tar sands to Kitimat, where I live, that effectively could wipe out what remains of our culture.
I think we're kind of facing the perfect storm to some extent. We have, where I live, because we have very pristine environments, we have the oldest living continuous culture in the world, and we have an enormous pressure of the resource exploitation industry. We're sort of cursed and blessed, as I've said a lot of times, with having just about every known mineral resource to mankind.
We have a penchant for believing that what we should be supporting is local fishermen who are attached to communities, who are hiring their children and grandchildren to work on the boats, who are fishing close to shore, and who are watching what happens to the resource over time. We did a report that demonstrated that increasingly we had exactly the opposite of that. We had a consolidation of fishing practice and a consolidation of fishing interest into fewer and fewer hands, larger and larger corporate interests, less and less connected to place.
So we have a lot of tourists coming in, and as a result, all the activities or people's way of making a livelihood it's all drawn into tourism. So with that, you lose some of the other economic activities like farming, livestock herding. That has been a traditional way of making a living.
Living Ocean's done a modeling some time ago where they transposed the Exxon Valdez impact area onto the coast from the Alaska border, and it went from the Alaska border and took in the top third of Vancouver Island. So when an oil spill happens, that whole region is wiped out.
We worry because tourism is very, very unpredictable. It is, if there is a good economy all over the world, there's a peace and everything is going well, we'll get a lot of tourists. But if tourists don't come, what do we do? Because we have given up the traditional way of living.
And coastal First Nations are working very hard to create a sustainable economy through selfish agriculture and others relying on the sea resources. Where do we turn?
If something happens, what?
It doesn't take rocket science to understand that less and less connected to place means less and less caring about what happens to that place. Because once you move past that resource management and multi-generational thinking, you move directly to how much can I get and how fast can I get it, and then I'll move on to something else. And that's what we're trying to fight against.
The pressures are global pressures, but they're local impacts.
So, from a vulnerability perspective, we still are operating in a a political and a sort of governance model that doesn't allow for the kind of sort of regional approaches that we ultimately have to take.
I was saying, one of our biggest challenges at the moment is that we have a political system that is not aligned with the environmental and social systems.
We're pioneering some work in what we call eco-districts, which is green neighborhood development strategy. In essence, looking at the neighborhood as an important geography for social and technological and business innovation, and trying to unleash the creativity and the sort of place-based strategies that ultimately can propagate and help cities become more resilient. But the day-to-day challenges of that is trying to organize local government towards those goals, infrastructure, utilities towards those goals, and then the community to get to support and to take hold and ultimately own that kind of strategy.
Most of the communities I have a million ideas and million projects. They don't know how to do them. They're doing it because they have their traditional knowledge of those things, but they don't know how to adapt it to market. They don't know how to develop market niches. They don't even have the technology to advance. You cannot develop quality processes around it. So all that we have to do it.
I think for the people that we work with is having access to the right information.
We know so many things, so much, and also ignore so much.
We work with people who have been socialized in a particular way.
We are in a system where the education doesn't teach people to do anything with their own hands. Nothing. I mean, you go to school in your village. Next step is to go away from the village. The following step is to go away from any rural areas. Go to the city. Where
the chief used to be the one that's allocating the land and working with the elders within those communities about the way to do things. That structure began to change as men began to live and work on the mines and live in the cities. So there is a lot of indigenous knowledge that I wouldn't say it's lost, but it's lying dormant at the moment.
It also has to be about business systems and municipal governance systems coming together. Otherwise, you end up having the same paradigm that sort of happens over and again, which is some communities fight and advocate for certain things, and there's nowhere to place that interest in that advocacy. Or likewise, local or state or national government suggest strategies that absolutely do not ring true in a community. So you have to create a strategy that kind of works from both directions.
Because our idea really is to work with them to create reliable prosperity. Other people, when they talk about reliable prosperity, they look at the money side and say, no. For us, it's not the money that matters, it's what the money does that matters. Money pays for school fees, it supports families, it keeps families together so that other people don't have to go and work in the cities. Everybody is in one place, and in that way, we're growing our families.
I don't think the challenge is in place. I mean, I think that the people in place are already, they get it. I mean, they've been beating on that drum for a long time, and it's like the glass ceiling. They've been pounding on that glass ceiling forever.
When we were told that, through a quick study, that the largest intact temperate rainforest left on Earth was in our territory, that spoke volumes to us. I think that, we have a responsibility here that's greater than just our little community.
We, as a world, have allowed other kinds of power dynamics because they make us comfortable. We've allowed other kinds of power dynamics to supersede what we instinctively know to be right. And we got to get back there. And it's not going to be easy. It's a fight in all the best and worst ways, I think.
Well, as hard as it is at times, I think what we've found, and I believe there's examples worldwide, change, I believe, only occurs if you can get all of the players together. If you can get all the players together, at least having a conversation that includes the First Nations communities, government, industry, outside experts.
Important challenge as human beings is to actually listen clearly what the message is that other people are talking about. One of the things we've failed to do as human beings, even though we've been given ears and brains and mouths to listen, we always tend to know what somebody else is saying before they finish a sentence. So we need to actually sit back and listen, I think, very carefully.
I believe, and the reason I stay with this work, and I've stayed with it as long as I have, is I really believe that we are in the middle of the biggest value shift that the world has ever seen. And that if we can open up the cracks that actually let the light in, it's not going to be that hard to get from here to there.
Unfortunately, human nature is that we continue to dwell on differences, when in fact we have much more in common. Our task is to be able to identify what that commonality is. And we have, as First Peoples, we have a significant contribution to make.
At the knowledge level, I think we can work together a lot to share the knowledge and get inspiration from each other. Organizations like Ecotrust are very innovative, and I'm very pleased to be here and learn more from them.
The fate of the world really hinges on people being able to have a conversation that's outside of politics, if you can imagine it. I mean, that seems like a dream, but that's my dream.
I think for me personally, I came here very hopeful, that the conversation that's going to take place, within these 3 days is going to yield something, that's going to be long lasting.
I'm very hopeful that that there's some sort of real sort of learnings and lessons and sort of friendships that come out of this, that then we can, depending on what you do, and in my case I do local work, which I think most of us at this conference do, there's a way to sort of pull from some of these other people and some of these other strategies and learn and sort of apply.
What kind of network can you put into place that can kind of offer an alternative to the course we've had? It had to be an organic somehow. So if it had to be organic, it has to be based on concepts, on key concepts and principles, on visions. It has to be horizontal, not hierarchical like we've had.
I think it's a series of incremental activities that add up to something profound. And I think in the case of the kind of work that's in front of us, I'm not suggesting incrementalism as being slow. I'm suggesting that it's a series of activities that add up and sort of build off one another.
In the actual process of building your ecoregions, if you don't really integrate completely the social process and the historical process in those places, then you run into more difficult things. So you really have to think about it.
We're all in one room, but we're strangers, to one another. But I think after these 3 days, we're going to be talking, as peers and as colleagues, knowing, that we've actually engaged on a one-on-one, face-to-face, engagement. So I am very hopeful, that within the next coming months, we're going to have something solid